I'm Forrest Sawyer, and this is Day One. Tonight, a hospital where the doctors were all powerful and complaints of shoddy medical care went unchecked.
The doctors were supposed to be policing themselves, and they weren't.
That is correct.
One man tried to stop it, and when he did, someone threatened to kill him. What happened after that is the biggest shock of all. Did they murder their... Still to come on Day One, someone threatened to kill this man.
Who was looking for someone to do a hit on you?
It was reported that it was a physician.
Why would doctors want to silence him? One man's incredible story when Day One continues. Day One continues with Forrest Sawyer. You know that when you check into a hospital, you put your life into the hands of the doctors in charge. You assume those doctors are accountable to their patients and to the hospital. That's certainly what one administrator believed when he took a job at a hospital just outside Cleveland, Ohio. He couldn't have been more wrong. He says he found doctors who were out of control, abusive with the staff, negligent with the patients. And when he tried to do something about it, he found he had put his own life on the line. Day One's John McKenzie has the story.
Parma, Ohio. A safe, sprawling suburb south of Cleveland. At the very heart of this conservative working-class community is Parma Hospital, built in 1961 by 6 surrounding suburbs. By 1986, the hospital was one of the area's major employers, but it was facing an uneasy future. It needed more money and more programs to assure quality medical care for patients. After a nationwide search for a new administrator, the Board of Trustees selected this man, Bernie Schlueter, to fix its growing problems.
We had received Bernie's record from Oshkosh, Wisconsin, where he had previously served, and he was extremely well regarded, and we just thought, this is a good man and the right man.
Happy birthday, dear Bernie.
After 14 years at the same hospital in Wisconsin, Bernie Schlueter was so liked by his former colleagues, they sent him this farewell tape.
Hi, Bernie. If you ever need a recommendation for somebody to tell how great a guy you are and what a terrific operation you ran here in Oshkosh to give quality health care, you can always call on me.
The most significant responsibility of a hospital and of its trustees and of its medical staff is to assure the public that any physician who practices within that hospital is indeed qualified.
A simple belief, but one that would change Schlueter's life. Within months of his arrival in Parma, he was surprised to find so many problems and so many problem doctors. First, an elderly physician was well known inside the hospital for falling asleep at the bedside of patients, yet he was allowed to continue practicing medicine. Then there was a surgeon who, according to witnesses, assaulted nurses when he couldn't reserve an operating room. After overturning equipment, he threatened to bomb the hospital. When Schlueter aggressively defended the nurses, some doctors took offense.
They previously had been accustomed to total freedom of behavior and activity without accountability at the hospital, and now comes along this new administrator who is holding them to a sense of responsibility and accountability.
When this doctor, Kubla, came up for promotion within the hospital, Schlueter discovered that he was the subject of more than 24 complaints from nurses, patients, and others. Complaints that included sexual harassment.
Trying to put his hand on my knee. There were times where he had whispered in my ear or tried to kiss me.
2 other doctors were so out of control that the Ohio State Medical Board had to step in and revoke their medical licenses. One of them, Dr. Ken Dvorak, was convicted of drug trafficking and sexual battery. The other was Dr. Neil Angerman, an obstetrician. The state found that his misuse of forceps had crushed the skulls of 4 infants, killing 3 of them. One of the cases occurred inside Parma Hospital. The doctors were supposed to be policing themselves, and they weren't.
That is correct. That's their paramount responsibility as an organized medical staff in the hospital, is to police themselves.
If the medical staff wasn't policing doctors, who was?
There is no policing.
Dr. Sidney Wolfe is a prominent patient advocate.
It's sometimes described as the there but for the grace of God go I syndrome, which is that if I report my colleague doctor today, when I do something wrong negligently, they might report me, so let's just keep it all quiet.
Soon, some doctors came to regard Schlueter as a problem, as a zealot, insensitive to their ways of practicing medicine, and they set out to discredit him. One woman told Day One that a Parma doctor paid her to criticize hospital management at a town meeting. But for Schlueter, the worst was yet to come. What began as a simple war of wills was about to escalate into something far more frightening. One day at the office, someone slipped an anonymous note under his door. It said, quote, "Yes, the doctors will inform their board members of your lowly bastard behavior, and what a scab of an administrator we have. If you continue to irritate us, you will push me personally to commit murder."
I was very, very alarmed. I kept it to myself initially because I did not want to unduly frighten my wife and children.
One afternoon when Bernie was home, the mail arrived and a letter arrived addressed to me. I opened the letter, and in the letter was a note that was typewritten that indicated that I should buy my black clothes. I would soon become a widow. It was time to buy a cemetery plot because Bernie's life was limited unless he left Parma Hospital.
Schlueter's life was not the only one threatened at the hospital.
I was going to my mailbox. I got this single piece of paper there that was from the computer printout in the doctor's lounge. It cited a reference to a quality assurance study, and it said, "USOB, you will be dead soon."
With Schlueter's encouragement, Dr. James Rambasak had begun an internal study on the quality of care at the hospital.
I think someone that felt criticized by the study took umbrage at that and wanted to do me harm.
The prime target of the threats, however, was Schlueter. Parma police and the FBI began to investigate. Suspicion soon began to focus on one man, one of the problem doctors, Kubla. Born on the island of Mauritius, a former British colony in the Indian Ocean, Dr. Kubla lives 20 minutes from the hospital on a secluded estate called Shangri-La. A camera and security system keep unwanted visitors at bay. The doctor already had a reputation for a volatile temperament.
Call me an old bastard and a son of a bitch and a MFer.
Ron Germana, the father of one of Kubla's patients, said he received this response when he questioned the doctor about his son's hospital bill.
I mean, he was abusive, and I think that if I would have been there face to face with him, he might have struck me, or tried to.
Day One obtained a police report in which a 61-year-old neighbor of Kubla said the doctor physically assaulted him, breaking his glasses in a dispute over parking. Dr. Kubla denied the charge. Although Dr. Kubla had been the subject of numerous complaints at the hospital, he wanted and expected to be promoted and given full privileges. Standing in his way, the administrator, Bernie Schlueter. According to FBI records obtained by Day One, a hospital employee said Dr. Kubla asked him to find someone to hurt Schlueter. The man told FBI agents that Kubla said, quote, "I'd like to have that SOB's legs broken or have his car blown up. I know the times he has meetings, and I know his address. I'd pay to have it done."
He had talked about hiring someone to do something to him.
Heidi Truderung, who worked in Kubla's office near the hospital, said she also heard the doctor talk about beating up Schlueter.
At the time, I didn't really put a lot of stock into it because I knew he was angry and I knew he was just venting frustration. But as time went on, he told me he knew where the administrator lived. He knew what cars were in his family. He knew what time his wife left. He knew the license plate numbers on the cars. And he made this well known to me as if I was going to pass it on to someone to do something.
I received a telephone call in the middle of the night by an individual who said that he had been approached the evening before to find a person down in the inner city of Cleveland who would be willing for pay to assassinate me.
I felt insecure. I wasn't ready to be a widow. I wasn't ready for our children to not have a father. I wasn't ready to find a place where I was going to spend the rest of my life without the man that I loved and had loved for many years.
With all these leads, Schlueter and his supporters believed that a suspect would be arrested any day.
But what happened next shocked them. The police and the FBI dropped the case. The FBI would only say, quote, it lacked jurisdiction. All the police would say is that they lacked enough evidence to charge anyone, but they acknowledge some investigative files were lost. In desperation, the hospital hired a private investigator.
What did the private investigator establish?
They had professional evaluation done of handwriting, typing, typewriters, grammar, punctuation. I might quickly add that a lot of the language was in what I would call Old English spelling.
For example, the word behavior, spelled with an O-U-R. The word realize, spelled with an S, found in both the death threat and Dr. Kubla's own business letter. The quality and quantity of evidence gathered by the private investigator was enough for the hospital's Board of Trustees to hold an exceptional closed-door hearing. A dramatic showdown between the doctor and the administration. For 72 hours, almost a dozen hospital trustees sat as a jury, evaluating complaints of unprofessional behavior by Dr. Kubla.
It was made into almost a courtroom kind of setting. There were some 20 to 25 witnesses.
72 hours of listening to the ranting and raving and the arguing of attorneys. The whole scene was just as undesirable as it possibly could have been.
When it ended, the trustees retired to their corporate boardroom to decide Dr. Kubla's fate. It didn't take long.
I've got to believe that with perhaps one exception on the board, that there wasn't a single trustee that wasn't convinced this man was as guilty as sin.
The board's decision: guilty of 3 incidents involving threats upon the administrator, including soliciting persons to assassinate the administrator. Guilty of 1 incident of sexual harassment and 1 incident of unprofessional behavior toward a patient. Bob Quick, who had served on the board longer than any trustee, was stunned by what the board did next. It did almost nothing. It allowed Dr. Kubla to remain on staff, putting him on probation.
The whole thing didn't amount to a hoot and a holler.
They find him guilty of issuing threats against the life of the administrator. And they want to keep this doctor in the hospital?
It's absolutely impossible to believe that they would reach the decision that they did, that this man should not be removed from the medical staff.
I was in a state of disbelief, if not shock.
What was the explanation given to you?
There was none given to me.
Dr. Kubla, seen here leaving his estate, has denied threatening Schlueter. He has also denied the other complaints against him. His lawyer called the board hearing, quote, nothing but a witch hunt, a vicious attack by an administrator against one of his physicians. My client did nothing wrong. Day One has tried repeatedly to interview Dr. Kubla, but he has refused each request. When Day One tried to talk to the doctor one morning as he arrived at work, this was his reaction. Trustee Joe Brank attended the month-long hearing on Dr. Kubla, but now says he can't remember any of it.
Were there some death threats at the hospital a while ago?
Not that I know of.
Was any doctor issuing threats?
I haven't heard of anything. Would you hear something like it? I didn't hear about it.
Trustees never discussed it?
No.
Quite honestly, anything that happens in the boardroom is confidential at Parma Hospital.
Chuck Harley, president of the hospital's board of trustees.
We speak to each other in the boardroom, and we have an unwritten law. When we leave, that's where it stays. Okay.
I'd like you to read something, if you would. Do you know what that is?
Yes, I've seen it before. I cannot comment on that, sir.
May I read the document? It says, "Enough is enough, you bastard. The time has now come. Either you leave this hospital or you buy yourself a prime lot in the cemetery." If someone sent you a letter like this, what would your reaction be?
Quite honestly, I'll have to go back and say I can't comment on it, but I've been threatened in my life, so it doesn't bother me, okay, to answer your question. But I'm not commenting on it.
A threat on someone's life is a serious matter, is it not?
It happens every day, that's right.
It happens every day?
Not at Parma Hospital, I mean in this country. I believe it happens. I read, it's about all we have in the papers nowadays.
Why did the trustees act this way? Why did they allow Dr. Kubla to remain at the hospital? Some believe the overriding concern was profits. Kubla, an internist, admits about 80 patients a year. The trustees were also worried that doctors who disliked Schlueter would take their patients to competing hospitals and hurt Parma's bottom line.
They hit the panic button. They have a trust to take care of that hospital, and here are the doctors telling them, we're going to take our patients someplace else.
I think the philosophy of some members of the board was that the business created by physicians is so extremely important to the bottom line of the hospital that you ultimately convince yourself that you'll tolerate anything, and this is the tragic mindset that some of them had.
The board ultimately decided to keep the entire Kubla affair secret, not only from hospital employees and patients, but from government regulators.
If a hospital disciplinary committee found a doctor guilty of threatening the life of a hospital administrator, would the Ohio State Medical Board want to know that?
Absolutely. You're talking about the state of mind of the individual involved.
Is there any justification for a hospital not reporting this?
I personally can't think of any.
We're telling you now that this took place at this hospital. These were the findings. I can show them to you.
In fact, it had already been my thought prior to your showing me this or handing me this that one of the very first things I would do would be to file a complaint based upon this conversation today.
You will initiate a complaint?
Yes.
Paul Cassidy is mayor of Parma Heights and one of 6 mayors who appoint the hospital's board of trustees. Year in and year out, the trustees have hired his private law firm as their legal counsel.
As legal counsel to the board of trustees, you advise them not to report the findings of this case.
I can't comment on it, and won't.
The Ohio State Medical Board told us that this was something that categorically should have been reported.
I can't comment on it.
As a mayor, is this something that you would like the public to know about?
Public doesn't have an absolute right to know everything.
You know, to some people, this looks like a cover-up.
Not much I can do about that.
Over the years, the hospital has paid Cassidy an estimated $1 million or more in legal fees, something Cassidy doesn't dispute. But when Schlueter planned to trim those legal fees, he says he incurred Cassidy's wrath.
And he left no question in anybody's mind but that he was extremely upset with Bernie Schlueter.
I received a visitor at my home on Sunday evening at supper time, surrounded by my family, which contained a letter telling me to appear the following morning at 8 a.m. and make a decision at that time whether to resign or be fired.
What explanation was given?
There was no explanation given, nor has any been offered since.
Mayor Cassidy denied playing a role in Schlueter's firing.
I had been a part of this group for 33 years and 7 months, and I never had seen a human being treated with such disrespect. And I was embarrassed. I was incensed. And so I resigned effective the day that Bernie was fired.
I felt like a tornado swept through my life and just took with it my reputation and my opportunities for using that good reputation to find another job.
What happened to Bernie Schlueter is more than a bizarre story of death threats and one man's personal trauma. It is also about a national system where doctors are allowed to police themselves in secret and where hospitals must weigh profits against patient safety.
It's almost as though instead of protecting the patients from hospitals that are doing damage to them, we're protecting the doctors in those hospitals and the hospitals from public disclosure.
The months that followed were not easy for Schlueter. Word reached him that Dr. Kubla had been promoted to full active status within the hospital. Meanwhile, Schlueter, with 4 sons in college and 3 other children at home, couldn't find work.
After the Board of Trustees fires you as administrator, you were sent yet another anonymous letter. This one reads, "Booted out with 13 hours' notice, escorted out by your own security. The time has now come for you to commit suicide. Pick a weapon of your choice. Signed, Ha Ha Ha." One more bit of humiliation?
Absolutely, and one which I came to grasp with the support of my wife and family, that perhaps humiliation and brokenness in spirit would serve as good fertile ground for rebuilding me for the future.
This story is not over. Just a few days ago, as a result of Day One's investigation, the county prosecutor's office began its own investigation into the death threats against Bernie Schlueter. For his part, Schlueter sued the hospital that fired him and agreed to settle out of court. After 2 years of being out of work, he now has a new job as Deputy Director of Healthcare Policy for the Ohio Department of Health.